They say life truly begins at 40, not as a consolation, not as a sweet phrase meant to soften the blow of aging, but as a profound truth about the unfolding of the human psyche. Why? Because it is often only after that age that we finally find the courage to face ourselves. Up until then, most of our choices are made on autopilot. We follow scripts handed to us long before we knew we had a choice. We wear the clothes of our upbringing, the rules of society, the invisible codes of culture, and the expectations of family. We chase approval, success, validation, yet if we look closely, much of what we pursue isn't truly ours. It's borrowed, it's rehearsed. Imagine spending decades in rehearsal for a play, learning lines that someone else wrote, perfecting gestures that were never yours, and practicing roles that keep you safely inside the boundaries of acceptance. You wear masks, you fit in, you adapt, and without even realizing it, you drift further and further away from the raw center of your existence. Carl Jung called this the first half of life, a phase dominated by the search for persona, the mask we present to the world. It is the time when the ego builds itself, grows strong, and seeks recognition. The young ego wants to be admired, to be seen, to belong, but it has not yet tasted the deeper meaning of being whole. And then one day, something inside begins to crack. For many, this shift arrives silently. It may appear as a vague unease, an unexplained sadness, a quiet restlessness you cannot name. A successful career suddenly feels hollow. A relationship begins to lose its spark. Beliefs that once held you up no longer sustain you. Even your own desires start to change. What is this? It is not the end, it is the beginning of your true life. It is the voice of the unconscious demanding to be heard. It is the self, that deeper and wiser center of the soul, finally knocking at your door. But here's the truth. This transition is rarely comfortable. Many resist it. Many hold desperately to the image of who they once were, clinging to the illusions of youth. They numb themselves, they distract themselves, they try to silence the whisper inside. And because of that, they end up living the second half of life as nothing more than a repetition of the first, stuck in old patterns, trapped in old masks, unable to step into the fullness that was waiting all along. This is why the statement, "Life begins at 40, carries weight only if we are willing to face what it demands. It isn't about a birthday or a number, it's about courage. The courage to strip away fantasies, to let the masks fall, to stop asking, "What do I want to do with my life?" And instead, ask the much deeper question, "Who is it that is living within me?" That question does not come easily. It usually arrives when time itself has pressed enough weight on our shoulders to make us listen. When enough disappointments, enough detours, enough years have stripped away the illusions we once clung to. So let me ask you, have you felt that quiet turning inside yourself? That restless sense that something must change, though you can't yet see how? That subtle call pulling you inward, urging you to look deeper? If so, you may already be standing at the doorway of transformation. And here's the beautiful truth. It does not matter if you are 40, 50, or even beyond. The call of the self does not run on human clocks. It whispers at the moment you are ready. The only question is, will you answer? If these words resonate with you, take a moment right now to declare it. Write in the comments below, "I am ready to begin my true life." Let that be your first step in claiming this turning point. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to Unshakable Mind, because together we're going to dive deeper into the questions that truly matter, the questions that unlock meaning, resilience, and authenticity. Don't walk this journey alone. Join a community of people who are daring to wake up to their real lives. Life does not begin with a number on the calendar. It begins the moment you decide to listen to your soul. You could start today, right now, if you are willing to walk through the doorway your ego has always feared. And what lies beyond that doorway is not another role to play, not another mask to wear, but the raw center of who you truly are. Picture a house built in a hurry, thrown together just enough to stand. At first, it works. It gives shelter. It looks solid from the outside, but as time passes, cracks begin to show, small at first, barely noticeable. Yet, slowly, the discomfort grows until it cannot be ignored. That house is the symbol of life before 40, a structure that functions, but not yet a home. Carl Jung saw the first half of life as this external construction: careers, social status, reputation, identity. The world outside demands performance, efficiency, achievement, and so the ego learns to dance to that rhythm, to play the part expected of it. But here is the quiet tragedy of that dance. The more we move outward, the further we drift from the center. The persona grows stronger, but the self remains hidden, waiting. And the cost of that distance is emptiness, an emptiness that creeps in quietly, like a shadow that follows without making a sound. By the time we reach 40, that shadow begins to speak. Sometimes it arrives as an existential crisis, sometimes as exhaustion, sometimes as a subtle disconnection from everything that once gave us meaning. For some, it takes the form of illness. For others, the loss of a relationship or a dream. And for many, it comes as a restless unease they cannot even name. But beneath all of these symptoms lies the same truth. They are the symbolic calls of the soul, urging us to return to what is real. Jung insisted that the suffering of midlife is not a collapse. It is an invitation into the process of individuation, the path of becoming who we truly are, instead of who the world expected us to be. And let us be clear, this process is not neat, it is not linear, it is not painless, but it is authentic. It strips away the illusions of identity and compels us to ask questions we once feared to face. Who am I when I am not performing a role? What gives my life meaning, not just pleasure? What is dying inside me, and what is struggling to be born? These are not the kinds of questions you can answer in a rush, and they are certainly not the ones society trains us to ask, which is why many, when they reach this threshold, turn away. They numb themselves with distractions. They drown the call of the soul in consumption, in denial, in the desperate attempt to cling to youth. This is what we often label the midlife crisis. But what if that so-called crisis is not a breakdown at all? What if it is the soul grabbing the wheel before time runs out? If you feel that stirring inside you, that something in you longs to change, do not dismiss it as fatigue. Do not write it off as stress, because it may be something far greater. It may be the beginning of your true story. Up until now, perhaps you have been a character in someone else's script, living by someone else's expectations. But now life is calling you to become the author of your own narrative. And to hear that call, you must be willing to enter the silence, because only in silence can the voice of the self rise above the noise of the persona. Only in stillness can the shadows finally reveal what they've been trying to teach you all along. So let me ask you directly, what cracks are appearing in the walls of your life? What shadow has been quietly following you, waiting for you to notice? These are not signs of failure. They are the doorways to transformation. If you feel this truth, write it in the comments. I choose to listen to my soul. Let that be your declaration, your commitment to step into this second half of life with honesty and courage. And if you want to walk this path with guidance and clarity, make sure you subscribe right now to Unshakable Mind. This is the place where we confront the illusions, where we explore the wisdom hidden in our struggles, and where we remind each other that the life we long for begins the moment we choose to wake up. There comes a moment in life when the soul seems to whisper, "You've lived outward long enough. Now it's time to come home." But what does it actually mean to begin this inner journey? It means daring to look within with honesty. It means closing chapters with awareness. It means discovering what holds lasting value and, perhaps most importantly, learning to live with presence. Not as an escape from the world, but as a deep commitment to your own essence. Carl Jung once said that the greatest treasure of life lies buried in the place you least want to dig. And isn't that the truth? By the time most people reach their 40s, they carry a quiet collection of invisible scars. Not just the wounds the world has seen, but the ones carefully hidden behind the smile, the job title, the busy schedule, and the responsibilities fulfilled. These scars live in silence, tucked behind the masks we've worn for so long. And then, one day, the inner mirror begins to show us something new. Ourselves without disguise. That reflection can be unsettling, even frightening, because it strips away everything external and confronts us with what lies beneath. Jung understood this. Stage is the beginning of contact with the deeper layers of the unconscious. Before this turning point, our psyche is primarily oriented outward. We study, we work, we build relationships, we construct an identity based on what we were told was right and acceptable. But after 40, a quiet force begins to pull us inward. It's as though the soul is saying, now that you've learned how to live for others, it's time to live for yourself. Not out of selfishness, but out of the necessity of becoming whole. This Jung called individuation, the process by which a person becomes who they truly are. A journey of integration where light and shadow meet, where contradictions no longer divide us but teach us, where losses and gifts are woven together into something authentic. Individuation cannot happen too early because it requires maturity. It requires the lived experience of realizing that success without meaning is nothing more than noise disguised as achievement. So, when someone in midlife begins to feel lost, when they sense that the map no longer makes sense, this is not weakness, it is not failure. It is the ego softening its grip, making space for the self, the deeper, wiser center of the psyche, to emerge. But this passage demands something rare, humility. The humility to unlearn the race for approval, to unlearn the habit of measuring worth by productivity, to unlearn the confusion of applause with love. And yes, this hurts. Because the very things that once sustained our identity begin to feel too small for who we are becoming. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, growth does not come from bypassing pain, from ignoring the shadow, or from pretending everything is fine. Growth begins when we dare to see the darkness within us, to name it, to sit with it. Only then does the light have meaning. So let me ask you, what are you ready to unlearn? What parts of your life feel too small for the person you are becoming? These questions are not meant to discourage you. They are meant to awaken you. Because the moment you face them, you step into a journey far richer than anything the first half of life could offer. And right now, I want you to make a declaration. If this resonates with you, write in the comments, "I am ready to unlearn and become whole." That single sentence can be your first step toward individuation, your first conscious act of listening to your soul. And as you walk this path, don't do it alone. Subscribe to Unshakable Mind. Here, we are committed to exploring the depths of psychology, the struggles of the human heart, and the transformative power hidden in our shadows. Every video is designed to remind you that you are not just a role, not just a persona, not just a mask. You are something infinitely deeper. And the second half of life is your chance to uncover it. The darkness of midlife often does not appear as chaos on the outside, but as a quiet unraveling within. It shows itself in regrets, in questionable choices, in a lingering ache for the life that was never lived. And yet, all of this is material for the soul. These fragments, the mistakes, the longings, the unfulfilled dreams, become the very stones from which we build the bridge toward what is new. Life, in its truest form, begins at 40 when we accept that we no longer have time to waste on what is not real. At this stage, self-knowledge is no longer a luxury. It becomes survival for the soul. This is the moment to make peace with who we have been, so that we can welcome, with gentleness, the person we still have the chance to become. Around this time, a haunting question often rises in the private corners of our minds. What if everything I built is not who I really am? Carl Jung observed that in midlife, many individuals face what he called a symbolic collapse. It is not that life crumbles on the outside, it is that life crumbles on the inside. The structures of meaning that once felt solid suddenly lose their weight. The truths we ignored for decades now demand to be heard. And here is the paradox. This collapse happens precisely when, from the outside, it seems as though we have made it. A successful professional may one day wake up with an inexplicable emptiness. A marriage that looks stable from the outside may begin to feel suffocating, even without fights or betrayal. A long-cherished dream, once achieved, may suddenly seem colorless. Jung gave this experience a name: disidentification. The ego, which once ruled with authority, begins to lose its throne. And in that emptying, the self, that deeper, more authentic center of the psyche, begins to rise. But this does not happen without struggle. The ego resists. It fights to maintain its old order. It whispers, "You're fine. This is just a phase. Stay the same." That is why so many people, when they reach this invisible threshold, try to silence the call. They drown it in distractions: travel, shopping, endless scrolling, new projects, constant busyness. But the more they run, the louder the emptiness cries out. Jung compared this point in life to crossing an invisible portal, a point of no return. On the other side of this threshold, the choice is stark: either accept the invitation to transformation and dive inward, or remain acting out a life that no longer carries a soul. But here lies a vital truth. Transformation does not demand that you destroy everything you've built. It asks only that you rebuild your connection with what is truly meaningful to you. Not what looks beautiful to others. Not what brings recognition. Not what fits neatly into society's boxes. But what makes your soul vibrate. And that, my friend, is the real question of midlife. What makes your soul come alive? Perhaps this is the very question you need to sit with today, and I want you to take a moment right now to declare it. Write in the comments, "I choose." What makes my soul alive? Let those words anchor you in your own truth, and if you haven't yet, subscribe to Unshakable Mind. Because here we do not run from the emptiness, we listen to it. We do not deny the cracks in the walls, we walk through them into deeper freedom. Every video here is an invitation to reconnect with yourself, to stop playing roles, and to finally live with soul. At midlife, something extraordinary happens. Around 40, a different frequency begins to hum within us, a quieter, deeper, more authentic sound. And those who fail to learn how to listen get lost in the noise of external expectations. Perhaps this is why Carl Jung believed this phase of life to be one of the most spiritually potent moments of human existence. It is the time when we stop merely surviving and finally begin to live with consciousness. But consciousness is never free. It demands a price: the courage to say no to what we are not, and the silence necessary to discover what we still have, the potential to become. At 40, the soul asks for synthesis. Every experience, successes and failures, victories and disappointments, joys and heartbreaks, begins to rearrange itself into a new inner landscape. It is as though time itself whispers, "You are not starting from zero. You are starting from a deeper place, a clearer place, a more whole place." Jung described this stage as the turning point, the threshold between outward life and inward life. Up until this moment, we have moved outward, toward career, toward relationships, toward identity, toward recognition. But now it is time to return. Not a passive return, but a reclamation. Not a regression to the past, but a rescue of what was buried beneath the demands of survival. Think about it. How many times have you abandoned something essential about yourself just to fit in? How many times have you said yes when every part of you was screaming no? How many pieces of your soul have been left behind in the name of financial security, emotional safety, or the fragile approval of others? By the time we reach 40, those abandoned parts begin to call out. And if we silence them for too long, they don't disappear. They turn into suffering. Jung warned that much of the psychic pain of midlife arises from this very abandonment of the soul, from living only outward, from clinging to dead structures out of fear of change, from keeping masks intact while the heart cries out for freedom. This is where the symbol of the crossing gains its true power. Crossing into midlife is not merely about aging, it is about moving into a new psychic dwelling. It is leaving behind the house of the ego, a fragile structure built with bricks of ambition, approval, and control. And it is walking toward the house of the self, where truth, silence, and authenticity live. But to make this passage requires something rare: acceptance. Acceptance of what will not return. The body changes, relationships shift, desires evolve, and to resist these transformations is to cling desperately to what no longer serves us. It is like trying to wear clothes that no longer fit, not out of pride, but out of fear of facing the world uncovered. Yet this symbolic nakedness of midlife is not shameful. It is the beginning of freedom. It is when we finally stop hiding from ourselves and dare to stand in the truth of who we are. Nakedness here means transparency. It means dropping the roles, the masks, the armor. It means allowing life to see us as we are, without pretending to be more or less than what we truly are. And maybe this is the essence of midlife, not the loss of youth, but the birth of authenticity. So let me ask you, are you willing to walk out of the house of the ego and step into the house of the self? Are you willing to stop dressing in roles that no longer fit and instead embrace the raw honesty of your own being? If your heart says yes, write it in the comments. I choose to live with authenticity. Let this be your affirmation, your symbolic act of stepping into freedom. And if you are ready to walk this journey with clarity and strength, subscribe to Unshakable Mind. This is where we learn not only to face change, but to embrace it. This is where we stop fearing silence and begin to hear what it has to say. This is where we remember that the true freedom of life comes not from clinging to what we once were, but from becoming who we were always meant to be. Carl Jung once said that true maturity has little to do with age. It isn't about how many birthdays we've celebrated, but about an inner willingness, the willingness to shed the mask, to step out of the roles we've played, and to walk with honesty toward what is still waiting to be discovered within us. That's why he believed that in many ways life truly begins at 40. Because 40 isn't a closing chapter, it's an opening. It's the moment when the soul finally feels ready to be heard. And I wonder, have you begun listening to that voice inside of you? That voice that has been whispering for years, drowned out by noise, by expectations, by the frantic chase for recognition. At 40, that whisper grows louder. It refuses to be ignored. And the real question is, will you have the courage to pause, to listen, and to let it guide you into a deeper way of living? One of the greatest mistakes of modern culture is to associate turning 40 with decline, the decline of youth, beauty, vitality. But Jung saw something entirely different. He believed that reaching this point is not about losing something, but about gaining the most precious thing of all, consciousness. At 40, life begins to quiet down, not in emptiness, but in depth. Our choices carry more intention. Our relationships become richer with meaning. Time no longer feels like an enemy chasing us, but a companion that reminds us of what truly matters. Think about it. In our 20s and 30s, we ran fast, we chased hard, we believed that happiness lived somewhere. Out there, in achievements, in possessions, in the next big thing. But at 40, a shift happens. We realize that rushing never took us as far as we thought it would, that the thrill of excess leaves us emptier than expected, and that real joy doesn't come from having it all, but from savoring the moments that are real, genuine connections with others, and perhaps most importantly, with ourselves. Jung described it this way. Before 40, we are mostly shaped by the world around us. We are children of circumstances, molded by the demands of society, family, and ambition. But after 40, something changes. We gain the chance to become the sculptors of our own existence. We are no longer just children of fate. We begin to become the authors of our own destiny. This is the symbolic turning point, the shift from living as someone else's creation to becoming the creator of our own story. And yet, this maturity brings with it a beautiful paradox. At the very moment we grow stronger, we also grow more sensitive. The pain of others moves us more deeply. The simplicity of life, watching the rain fall, hearing the laughter of a child, sitting in silence with someone we love, suddenly carries a profound beauty. Silence itself starts speaking louder than 1,000 words. It is as if our eyes finally turn inward and we discover an inner world vast and unexplored, waiting to be lived. But Jung also offered a warning here. He spoke of a subtle danger that arises at this stage of life. Nostalgia, the temptation to look back and believe the best is already behind us, to sink into the sadness of what once was, forgetting that the soul never thinks this way. Nostalgia can paralyze. It is the ego's trick, designed to keep us clinging to what is safe instead of embracing change. The soul knows better. The soul understands that life is cyclical, that every season has its own gifts. Just as a garden can bloom again and again, new flowers can rise within us if we are willing to tend to the soil of our inner life. At 40, the task is not to cling to yesterday's blossoms, but to prepare the ground for tomorrow's growth. So let me ask you, are you willing to water the garden of your soul? To nurture it with honesty, with silence, with courage? To step into the second half of life not as a decline, but as a rebirth? If this resonates with you, write it in the comments. I choose to water my inner garden. Let those words be your declaration, your commitment to growth, no matter your age. And while you're here, I invite you, if you feel these reflections stirring something inside you, to subscribe to Unshakable Mind, because this space was created for people like you, people who are ready to listen to their soul, to break free from the noise, and to step into life with clarity and strength. The journey doesn't end at 40. It begins, and if you allow it, this chapter can become the most powerful and meaningful one yet. To live fully in the second half of life, Jung believed, is to begin nurturing the inner garden, watering the soul, tending to the roots of presence, and cultivating the silence that remains once the noise of the world finally fades. It is in this silence that true life begins to take form. And perhaps that is the paradox. In youth, we are so consumed with making noise, proving ourselves, being seen and accepted, that we rarely stop to listen. Yet in midlife, when the outer applause quiets down, the stage opens for the most authentic act we will ever perform, the act of simply being. Jung often said that if the second half of life is embraced with depth, it carries more meaning than all of youth combined. Because youth is fueled by proving, while maturity is fueled by expressing. And true expression, when it comes from the core of who we are, is the purest form of freedom. There comes a moment when you look back and realize that what you thought was the path was only preparation, that the jobs you pursued, the relationships you clung to, the goals you chased, they were not the destination, they were the training ground. The real journey begins when the soul demands wholeness, not success, truth, not approval, depth, not speed. That is why so many, upon entering this season, change careers, end long-standing relationships, begin new ventures, or rediscover forgotten passions. From the outside, it may look like madness, but in truth, it is awakening. The persona, the social mask we wear to fit in, starts to lose its grip. And the self, the essence of who we truly are, finally begins to emerge with clarity. Jung warned that resisting this emergence has consequences. To ignore the soul's cry for authenticity is to invite suffering, sometimes through anxiety, depression, even physical illness. Because the psyche, just like the body, refuses to live in disguise forever. That is why listening becomes sacred in this stage. Listening not only to the voice of the heart, but also to the whispers of the body. The headaches that speak louder than our unspoken words, the tension that reveals the truths we've tried to bury, and above all, the silence that only reveals itself when we turn down the volume of the world. In that silence, we find alignment. We discover the axis around which our life is meant to turn, and there, in that inner sanctuary, the exhausting need to pretend dissolves. There, we are simply ourselves. But living from this truth requires courage. Jung often said that in order to step into who we truly are, we must let die what has already served its purpose. And that death, though symbolic, terrifies us, because we were trained to hold on, to accumulate, to never release. Yet midlife teaches us the opposite. To live is to let go. Just like a tree in autumn sheds its leaves, not because it is weak, but because it trusts the cycles of life. It knows that only by releasing can it be reborn. This is the essence of the second half of life. It is not decline, it is ripening. To the fruit of the soul begins to reveal its sweetest flavor, but only after enduring all the seasons of growth. Have you ever noticed how the eyes of someone seasoned by life carry something no young person possesses? There is a depth, a quiet strength, a kind of luminous sadness that has been transformed into wisdom. Their gaze is not restless, it is anchored, not frantic, but profound. That is the gift of maturity. And this is where I want to pause and ask you something. Have you reached a point in your journey where you feel this shift happening inside? Where you no longer chase every applause, but instead yearn for authenticity? If this speaks to you, write in the comments, "I choose to live with authenticity." Because writing it down isn't just for me, it's for you. It's a declaration, a commitment, a seed planted in your own psyche. And while you're here, I want to invite you to join this space, this community of seekers, by subscribing to Unshakable Mind. This channel exists to guide you through reflections like this, to give words to the things your soul may already be whispering. If you've been longing for depth, for meaning, for the courage to face yourself, you are in the right place. Subscribe, because together we're not just consuming content, we're walking a path of transformation. The truth is, midlife is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of the real story. And if you choose to listen, to let go, and to step into your true self, you will find that the second half of life is not about decline. It is about becoming whole. Have you ever noticed how the eyes of those who have truly lived carry something different, something that the young rarely possess? It isn't a sparkle of naive enthusiasm, but rather a calmness, a steady flame that comes not from the absence of pain, but from the acceptance of it. That calm is born from having faced storms and learning to stand in the rain without fear. It's a wisdom you cannot be taught in classrooms. A wisdom no book can simply hand to you. It is lived, absorbed, etched into the soul through experience. Carl Jung saw this as one of the greatest gifts of midlife. The chance to inhabit your existence fully, to walk through the world without needing to lose yourself in it. Life in many ways begins at 40, not because something magical happens overnight, but because at 40 we start to truly meet ourselves. At this stage, we begin to cherish what once seemed insignificant, the silence of the early. Morning becomes sacred. The simple act of sharing a real conversation with someone who listens, not to reply, but to understand, feels profound. A meal prepared slowly, with intention, nourishes more than just the body. Even the body itself, though it carries aches and limitations, becomes something we honor rather than fight against. And most of all, time. Time becomes precious, no longer to be wasted in the frantic chase of meaningless speed. Jung believed that in the second half of life, the soul begins searching for meaning. And here's the truth, that meaning isn't found where it used to be. It's not in the empty promises of youth, nor in the trophies and validations that once dazzled others. It's found in the invisible threads, holding everything together, the coherence between what we feel, what we think, and what we do. It's in the freedom of finally living as ourselves, with no more performance, no more masks. But this freedom requires surrender. Living with meaning isn't about control. It's about releasing control, allowing life to unfold, even when it doesn't follow the blueprint our ego carefully designed. It's about recognizing that some dreams must be let go, that some people will stay behind, and that this isn't a tragedy. It's maturity. It's the soul saying, you no longer need to hold everything together, you just need to hold on to yourself. Jung saw this phase as a rite of passage, deeply spiritual in nature. It's the moment when we stop being commanded by social expectations and start listening to the demands of our own soul. But let's be clear, this awakening doesn't come from the outside. No guru, no teacher, no book, not even this video, can hand it to you. It's an inner spark, quiet, often solitary, and precisely because of that, profoundly sacred. It happens when we finally look inside and say with conviction, enough. I can no longer live a life that isn't mine. And from that moment on, even if nothing visibly changes around us, everything within us begins to shift. The ground beneath feels more stable, the air around us feels lighter, the inner chaos settles, and we discover what Jung called a renewed center, a point of equilibrium where past and future stop fighting each other, and where we finally begin to dwell in the present. And here's the miracle. That present moment is where healing begins. Not healing as in repairing what's broken, but healing as in integration. All the parts of ourselves we once rejected, silenced, or disowned begin to come home. And this doesn't make us perfect. It makes us whole. By 40, life is no longer a desperate sprint to some imagined finish line. It becomes a crossing, slower, deeper, richer. It transforms into a pilgrimage where the destination matters far less than the authenticity of the path. And those who dare to walk it with courage discover a beauty that youth in all its vibrancy cannot yet hold. So let me ask you, are you ready to embrace that crossing? Are you willing to say, I choose to live with meaning, even if it means letting go? If you are, write it in the comments. I choose to live with meaning. Let those words mark your beginning. And remember, you are not walking this journey alone. Here at Unshakable Mind, we walk together. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next steps of this path. Share this reflection with someone who may need it, and let's build a community of people who are tired of masks, tired of running and ready to live whole, unshakable lives. The greatest part of life is not something that was left behind in the past. It's here, right now, waiting for you to notice it. Have you ever observed the eyes of someone who has truly lived? They don't carry the shine of illusion. They carry the glow of resilience, the quiet brilliance of a person who faced darkness, who walked through shadows, and still chose to keep moving forward. Carl Jung understood something profound. Life after 40 is no longer a display case for the world to admire. It becomes an excavation, not to discover something brand new, but to unearth what was always there, hidden under layers of neglect, distraction, and fear. Yet this excavation is not quick or easy. Each layer removed reveals a piece of truth, and not all truths are easy to face. That's why so many resist. That's why so many pretend. They say, "I'm fine, everything's fine," but deep down they know. There's a hollowness in what they're living. Their soul missing from their story. Jung often said that illness, anxiety, and even midlife crises are not signs of weakness or madness. They are the cries of the soul demanding to be heard. They are wisdom, rising from within, begging us to stop, to listen, and to realign. And when we finally do, something extraordinary happens. The reordering doesn't occur outside, in the calendar or in the chaos of circumstances. It begins within. Certainties that once felt absolute dissolve into humble. Sincere questions, harsh, rigid opinions soften into understanding. Old wounds stop being scars of shame and transform into gateways, pathways to new meaning. This is the heart of maturity. It is not measured by the answers we collect, but by the depth of the questions we dare to ask. Who are you when there's nothing left to prove? What do you love when no one is watching? What does your soul whisper when the world finally goes silent? These are the questions life after 40 places before us. Not to break us down, but to set us free from expectations, from masks, from everything that was never truly ours to begin with. Jung believed this stage of life required immense courage, the courage to look back without regret, the courage to look forward without anxiety, the courage to stay grounded in the present moment without running away. And it is exactly within that courage that rebirth takes place. Life doesn't begin when everything is solved or polished. It begins when you accept that nothing will ever be fully complete, and yet you still choose to live wholly with all that you are. So let me ask you, are you ready for this rebirth, or are you still waiting for permission from a world that never truly saw you? Perhaps now is the time, not because you're running out of years, but because for the first time you are truly ready. Turning 40 is not the end of a cycle. It is the awakening into the most authentic cycle of all. The cycle where your existence no longer depends on who you're supposed to be, but on who you truly are. If this message resonates with you, write in the comments, "I choose to live fully now." Let's see how many of us are ready to step into this rebirth together. And if you're finding strength in these reflections, subscribe to Unshakable Mind right now. This is just the beginning of a journey into deeper truths. This is the stage where we finally have the chance to break free from molds, to stop living as replicas of expectations, and instead start living as works of art, unique expressions of our soul. It is here that we stop measuring life by the rulers others hand us and begin to navigate using an inner compass, more sensitive, more attuned, more true. The beauty of living with maturity lies in realizing that we don't need so much to be more. Less noise, more silence. Less rush, more presence. Less craving to be noticed, more desire to be whole. At 40, the way we move through the world changes. Relationships change. We seek depth over performance. We long for connections that honor time, fatigue, and silence, not just smiles. Work changes. We stop chasing titles and start pursuing meaning. The body changes too. But instead of fighting it, we begin to listen to it, honoring it as a temple. And the soul, oh, the soul, begins to speak with more clarity, in dreams, in fleeting intuitions, in encounters that seem accidental but are anything but. Carl Jung taught that the true sense of life reveals itself when we stop fleeing from our shadows and begin to integrate them, when we stop chasing ideals and instead embrace who we already are. This integration does not make us perfect. It makes us whole. And to be whole may be the most sacred experience we can have, because from wholeness, everything changes. The way we listen, the way we love, the way we move through life. The urgency of life dissipates, replaced by depth, and in that depth, life truly begins. Life doesn't begin at 40 because of the number itself. It begins because somewhere along the path, you allow yourself to stop merely surviving and choose to start living, with presence, with courage, with soul. If you've made it this far, perhaps you've already felt the call, the subtle stirring inside you, a memory, a dormant courage, a desire to start anew. Keep following that. There is no more time to waste on what does not ignite your spirit. Life is waiting, not out there in the world, but in here, within you, where everything begins. To the eyes of the world, 40 may seem like just another number, but to the eyes of the soul, it is the beginning of a new kind of listening. And if that kind of listening resonates with you, share this video with someone who also senses that something must change, even if they don't yet know what. Sometimes it's exactly this kind of nudge that awakens a shift in others. And I want to ask you now, if something in this video has stirred something in your heart, a courage, a memory, a whisper of your own soul, write it in the comments. I am ready to live fully. Let this declaration mark the first step toward your rebirth. And don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe to Unshakable Mind. This is more than a channel. It's a journey together into reflection, depth, and transformation. Join a community of people who are not satisfied with merely surviving, who are ready to walk the path toward authenticity, presence, and inner freedom. Remember, life doesn't wait, and neither should you. And so, here we are at the threshold of something new. This is the moment where a light ignites in the places that once seemed dark, where the shadows you thought you couldn't face begin to reveal their hidden wisdom. Every insight, every stir of courage, every subtle shift within you is a spark. It may be small, but it is enough to illuminate a path you didn't know existed. If something in this journey has touched you deeply, if a thought, a memory, or a feeling has been awakened within you, the comments below are open for you. This is more than a space to type words. It is a meeting place, a place for those who have already walked through challenges, for those walking through them now, and for those finally ready to begin. Share your reflections, your intentions, even the simplest statement like, I am choosing to live fully. Let others feel the courage and honesty that you bring. In doing so, you create a ripple, because authenticity never exists in isolation. Your presence here is not unnoticed. Every moment you spend reflecting, every pause to listen to your own soul, every choice to step forward contributes to something larger. It gives meaning to these words, to this effort, and to the countless hours spent exploring what it truly means to be human. And your voice, yes, your voice is part of that meaning. Life, as Carl Jung taught us, is not about arriving at perfection or achieving a final destination. It is about the ongoing process of becoming. It is about reclaiming the self that has been buried beneath obligations, expectations, and distraction. And this process, this journey, is only possible when you decide to be fully present, when you choose depth over superficiality, courage over comfort, and honesty over pretense. So here is my invitation to you. Continue this journey with us. Subscribe to Unshakable Mind and become part of a community dedicated to reflection, growth, and the courage to live authentically. Hit like if these reflections resonate with you. Share this video with someone who may need a spark to awaken their own path. And most importantly, comment below, because your story, your insight, and your voice matter. Together, we create a space where transformation is possible, where the second half of life isn't a quiet decline, but a vibrant awakening. Remember, life begins not when the world tells you it's time, but when you finally allow yourself to live fully. And if you are willing to answer that call, to embrace your true self, to walk with courage and presence, then this is your moment. This is where your story truly begins. Step into it, share it, live it, and let this awakening, this illumination, guide every step you take from now on. Your soul has been waiting. Your life is waiting. And the journey, the real journey, starts here, right now.